Did you ever wonder if God is like a mischievous being playing games with mathematicians?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting way to start.
It is how our subject today, Paul Erdős, imagined it.
Really?
He called this being the supreme fascist.
Okay, I'm intrigued already.
And we're going to explore that and a lot more today as we take a deep dive into the life of Erdős.
This should be fun.
We'll be looking at the question of whether there's a link between like genius and what some might call madness.
Oh, the Mad Genius Thesis. I like it.
Exactly. And our guide for this deep dive is Paul Hoffman's biography, The Man Who Loved Only Numbers.
A fantastic book. I'm ready to jump in.
So Erdős is really like a perfect example of this whole paradox, you know?
You mean his eccentricities?
Yeah, his nomadic lifestyle, the way he talked, that intense devotion to math at the expense of just about everything else.
I mean, the guy basically lived out of a suitcase, always on the move, always collaborating.
Right. He was like a mathematical monk wandering the world in search of these beautiful proofs.
And Hoffman doesn't shy away from those eccentricities at all. He talks about Erdős's fear of germs.
Oh, yeah.
His aversion to being touched, even his amphetamine use.
Which, by the way, was pretty common among mathematicians at the time.
True, but still. But what's interesting is how Hoffman presents these things not as like flaws or pathologies,
Right.
but almost as like integral parts of his genius.
Like that makes me think about his whole thing with material possessions.
Oh, yeah.
He owned almost nothing.
Right. Just a suitcase and a head full of math.
It's like by getting rid of all the stuff most people care about,
Yeah.
he freed up space in his mind for math.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
It challenges our whole definition of success, you know?
For sure. It makes you wonder if maybe all that societal pressure to accumulate things actually stifles creativity,
Yeah, it could be.
especially that kind of abstract mathematical creativity that Erdős had.
Exactly. Maybe his mind was just unburdened, free to explore these incredible mathematical landscapes.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And don't forget his constant traveling, always moving from one university to the next.
Yeah, collaborating with practically every mathematician on the planet,
It was like he was pollinating the field of mathematics.
spreading ideas, sparking new collaborations everywhere he went.
I love that analogy. We can't forget his language either.
Oh yeah, his unique vocabulary.
Epsilons for children, bosses for women, and God as the supreme fascist.
It's like he created his own language, a language of mathematics.
Totally. And maybe that unique way of seeing and describing the world was key to his mathematical breakthroughs.
Maybe he just wasn't bound by the same like conventional ways of thinking. He approached problems from unexpected angles,
Right.
often using what he called elementary methods to solve some really complex problems.
Like his proof of the prime number theorem.
Oh yeah, a theorem that had stumped mathematicians for decades.
And Erdős, along with Adel Selberg, found this incredibly elegant proof.
Using what they called elementary methods.
Pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah, totally. Especially considering that G.H. Hardy, a leading mathematician at the time, had said that such a proof using elementary methods was impossible.
Shows you the power of thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. And maybe, just maybe, it was Erdős's detachment from the everyday world that allowed him to see what others couldn't.
Immersed in that world of numbers and proofs.
Right. So are we saying his eccentricities fueled his genius, or were they just like a side effect?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
A heart of the Mad Genius Thesis.
Exactly. But one thing's for sure, Erdős wasn't some solitary genius working in isolation.
Oh no, he thrived on collaboration.
He was always seeking out other mathematicians to bounce ideas off of,
Yeah.
to challenge his thinking, and to push the boundaries of what was known.
He'd just show up on their doorsteps, you know?
Really?
Yeah. He'd say, my brain is open, and then dive right into a problem. Work tirelessly until they found a solution.
Wow, I can only imagine the energy in those rooms.
Must have been electric.
And for Erdős, it wasn't just about finding any solution. It was about finding the most elegant, the most beautiful proof.
He believed that every theorem had a perfect proof hidden somewhere.
Right. Tucked away in that Supreme Fascists book he talked about.
That's such a great image, right? This divine collection of perfect proofs waiting to be discovered.
I love it. It speaks to this idea that there's an underlying order to the universe.
A hidden beauty, even in the most complex mathematical concepts.
And it makes you wonder if all those truths, those perfect proofs, are even accessible to the human mind.
Or are there limits to what we can comprehend, even with a mind as brilliant as Erdős's?
That's a really profound question, isn't it?
It is. But before we get lost in the philosophical weeds, let's bring it back to Erdős and the specifics of his work.
Okay, good idea. So we've talked about his eccentricities, his collaborative spirit, his search for elegant proofs.
But Hoffman's book also dives into some really fascinating examples of his mathematical brilliance.
Okay, like what?
Things like Ramsey theory, the Erdős number, his encounters with other mathematical giants like G.H. Hardy and Srinivasa Ramanujan.
Each one offering another piece of the puzzle.
A glimpse into the mind of this remarkable individual.
And maybe another clue to this connection between genius and eccentricity.
Exactly.
So you ready to dive into those specifics?
Absolutely. Let's go. It's amazing how Erdős's work, which can seem so abstract,
Yeah.
actually has all these practical applications.
I know. Math is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems so theoretical, but it's the foundation for so much of our understanding of the universe.
Exactly. Like Erdős's work with number theory and combinatorics, that stuff laid the groundwork for things like computer science, cryptography, even network theory.
So let's talk about some specifics. You mentioned Ramsey theory earlier.
Oh, yeah.
How does that connect to the real world?
Well, remember how we were talking about finding order and randomness?
Yeah.
Ramsey theory is all about that. If it's that in any large enough system, even a random one, you're going to find patterns.
Like the stars in the sky, right?
Exactly. Even though they seem randomly scattered,
Yeah.
we see constellations.
Patterns formed by pure chance.
Right. And that same principle applies to all sorts of things. Take social networks, for example.
Right.
As the number of people in a network grows, Ramsey theory says certain structures are bound to emerge, like clusters of friends.
Oh, interesting.
Or people with shared interests.
So you're saying Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah.
They're all governed by these mathematical principles?
In a way, yeah. And it goes beyond social connections.
Okay.
Think about communication networks, the internet itself.
Right.
The way information flows, the formation of hubs and connections.
Yeah.
All of that can be understood through Ramsey theory.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. And Erdős was a real pioneer in this field. He even came up with a theorem called the friendship theorem.
Friendship theorem.
Yeah.
What's that?
It basically says that in any group of people where everyone knows a certain number of other people, there will always be at least one person who's a common friend to a specific set of people.
So, like, if we're at a party and everyone knows at least 3 other people,
Yeah.
there's bound to be someone who's a mutual friend to a group of 3 others.
Exactly. It might seem obvious, but to prove it mathematically, you have to use graph theory, which Erdős was a master of.
And this theorem about friendship, it has applications in computer science and network design.
You got it.
It's like these mathematical principles are the hidden structure of our world.
I like that, the hidden scaffolding
Yeah.
upon which our social and technological worlds are built.
Exactly. And speaking of interconnectedness, we have to talk about the Erdős number.
Ah, yes. The mathematical famous tree.
It's like a fun way to measure your distance from Erdős in the world of math, right?
That's it.
Remind me how it works again.
So Erdős himself has an Erdős number of 0.
Right.
If you co-authored a paper with him directly, you have an Erdős number of 1.
Got it.
If you co-authored with someone who co-authored with Erdős, your number is 2.
And so on.
Exactly. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but for mathematicians.
I love that. And it's amazing how many famous mathematicians have low Erdős number.
It really is. It shows how collaborative he was and how far his influence spread.
It's like he created this web connecting mathematicians across different fields and generations.
A web of mathematical knowledge.
And it goes beyond just math, right? Because he worked with physicists, computer scientists, even economists.
Yeah, his influence is everywhere.
It's a good reminder that knowledge doesn't fit into neat little boxes.
Definitely.
It's interconnected and fluid, and Erdős, with his disregard for boundaries and his love of connections, he embodies that perfectly.
And maybe his eccentricities, his nomadic lifestyle, his focus on math,
Yeah.
maybe those things allowed him to move so freely between those boundaries.
It makes you wonder if those unconventional parts of him weren't just quirks,
Right.
but like essential ingredients of his genius.
It's a fascinating question to consider.
For sure. But as we go deeper into Erdős's world, we keep finding more examples that blur the lines between the abstract and the practical.
Yeah, the eccentric and the profound.
Like his encounters with other mathematical giants.
Ah, yes. Like G.H. Hardy and Srinivasa Ramanujan.
Okay, those are some big names.
Those meetings of the minds. Each one gives us a glimpse into Erdős's intellectual world and how his perspective shaped his interactions.
I'm really curious to hear about those encounters, especially the story about Erdős and the Monty Hall problem.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
I heard it shows how even brilliant minds can be fooled by probability.
It really does. And it shows Erdős's willingness to engage with problems outside his usual area
Yeah.
and his insistence on finding those elegant, satisfying solutions.
So should we dive into those stories then?
Let's do it.
I'm eager to see how these encounters might shed more light on the Mad Genius Thesis. This idea that unconventional thinking might be a key ingredient in extraordinary creativity.
Let's go. These stories are too good to miss.
All right, let's talk about those legendary encounters Erdős had with other mathematical giants like G.H. Hardy and Srinivasa Ramanujan.
Oh, yeah. Figures who, like Erdős, seem to just have this intuitive grasp of numbers, this almost mystical connection.
It's fascinating, right? Hardy, this very proper British academic.
A staunch defender of pure mathematics.
Exactly. He famously said that none of his discoveries would ever make the least difference to the amenity of the world.
But then he meets Ramanujan, this self-taught Indian prodigy.
Whose mathematical insights were just incredible.
Like they came fully formed, almost divinely inspired.
What a contrast. Hardy, the logician, obsessed with rigorous proofs.
And Ramanujan, whose genius was all about intuition.
I wonder how Erdős, with his own unique approach, fit into that dynamic.
Well, Hoffman describes a relationship of mutual respect and admiration between Erdős and Hardy.
Yep.
They both loved the beauty and elegance of pure math, even if their methods were different.
Right.
Hardy recognized the brilliance of Erdős's elementary methods.
And Erdős respected Hardy's dedication to mathematical purity?
Exactly. And as for Ramanujan, well, he was a figure shrouded in mystery.
His notebooks are legendary.
Filled with these cryptic formulas that still baffle mathematicians today.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And even though there's no record of them ever actually meeting.
Really?
Yeah, Hoffman points out the parallels in their thinking.
How so?
They both had this uncanny ability to see patterns and connections that others just missed.
Like they were tapping into some hidden source of mathematical truth.
It's almost like a mathematical wellspring beyond logic and reason.
Very mystical. It really feeds into that mad genius idea.
Right. The idea that exceptional creativity might be linked to one of thinking that goes beyond the ordinary.
But even these unconventional minds had to deal with the limits of the ordinary world, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the story of Erdős and the Monty Hall problem comes in.
Okay, remind me about that one.
So imagine you're on a game show.
Yeah.
There are 3 doors.
Okay.
Behind one is a car. Behind the other 2 are goats.
Right. I remember this.
You pick a door. Then the host, knowing where the car is, opens one of the other doors to reveal a goat. And then offers you the chance to switch to the other closed door.
It feels like the odds are 50-50 at that point, right?
That's what most people think. But the math actually says that switching doors doubles your chances of winning.
Really?
Yep. And Erdős, even with his deep understanding of probability, got it wrong at first.
Wow.
He insisted that switching wouldn't change the odds. Even when people explained the logic to him, he couldn't accept it.
So how did they convince him?
They had to run a computer simulation, thousands of trials to show him the results.
That's pretty funny.
It just goes to show that even the most brilliant minds can get stuck in their own assumptions.
Yeah, and sometimes a brute force computational approach can reveal truths that even elegant reasoning can't.
Exactly. And it highlights the growing importance of computers and mathematics, something that Erdős, who loved pure thought and pen and paper proofs, was resistant to at first.
But even Erdős eventually came around to acknowledging the power of computational tools. Right.
He did. He might not have loved computers, but he saw their value in tackling complex problems.
Especially those involving huge data sets and complicated calculations.
Right, and that, to me, speaks to another aspect of Erdős's genius, his intellectual humility.
He was willing to admit when he was wrong.
And he was always open to new ideas, even if they challenged his own beliefs.
That's a great quality to have.
It's a lesson for all of us to stay open to new ways of thinking, even when they challenge our preconceived notions.
It brings us right back to the heart of the Mad Genius Thesis.
Yes. This idea that unconventional thinking might be a key ingredient in extraordinary creativity.
So was it Erdős's unique mind, with its disregard for social norms, its obsessions, its focus on truth, that allowed him to see things others couldn't?
It's possible, isn't it? Maybe those traits that made him seem different were actually essential to his genius.
We may never know for sure, but exploring lives like Erdős's helps us appreciate the full spectrum of human potential.
And recognize that brilliance can take many forms.
Maybe we even gain a little more understanding of that complex relationship between genius and eccentricity.
Between the brilliance that lights up our world and the quirks that make us human.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the life and work of Paul Erdős.
It's been a fascinating journey.
I hope it sparked your curiosity about this remarkable individual.
And the enduring question of the mad genius.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Pick up Hoffman's biography, The Man Who Loved Only Numbers.
Delve into Erdős's world, and maybe you'll discover your own answers to the questions we've raised.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep those brains open.
And never stop questioning the nature of genius creativity and what it means to be truly exceptional.